Hello everybody, Dr. Dave here. Welcome to Tipsy Vervet. The purpose of our podcast is to help people make sense of life and create meaning. Well, what we talk about is based on our own experiences with addiction and helping other people who are overcoming addiction. The principles that we share are universal, and we think they'll be helpful to anyone who aims to better understand themselves and who wants to cultivate a life that's worth living, regardless of what their past experiences might be.
I'm Pierre, and I've been involved in the addiction community for over a decade. This podcast is independent of any other work we do, and we're in no way affiliated with anyone else. We hope that the spirit that comes across in our conversations is one of compassion, and that you find it helpful.
Tipsy Vervet.
Hello, welcome to the podcast. I'm here with my good friend David.
Hi, P.
What are we going to talk about today?
Today, let's talk about executive function today, because executive function is the basis. It's the basis for healthy coping skills and forming healthy, mutually respectful and empathetic and intimate relationships with other people. And the most important thing about executive function, and this is often lost by a lot of people, is that it's learned. You learn it as you grow up as a healthy child, right? In a healthy family where your emotions are validated and you're motivated to do things and you're encouraged to do things. And when things don't turn out so well, your mum and dad say to you, hey, come on, that was a good try. Let's try again. Let's try something different. And as you grow up as a small child and you learn that home is a secure place, and then you become a toddler and you learn that you're independent, but home is a secure place, you can always come back. And then you start doing things and you realize you're an individual and it's worth trying and it's worth doing things, and things often turn out well. And not always. And when they don't turn out well, it's worth trying again because things are worth doing. In other words, you learn to be motivated, you learn to persevere, you learn that if you bother, then you can cultivate the own direction of your life, and you can be a healthy, contributing individual, which of course is important because that's what gives you your sense of self-worth. And as you grow up and you will develop your own sense of identity. One of the things that we frequently hear, right, with people who are addicted to alcohol and other drugs, they often say that when I was growing up, I didn't ever feel like I fitted in. Nobody feels like they fit in. This is the human being, right? It's the nature of being a human being. But what they're actually expressing is this profound sense of separateness from other people because of that not feeling like they fit in. In other words, they can't use that feeling of not fitting in for its real purpose. And the real purpose of not feeling like you don't fit in is to recognize that you're not the same as everybody else. And when you recognize that you're not the same as everybody else, you recognize that you are an individual with something individual to contribute. And when you recognize that you are an individual with something different to contribute, then, of course, paradoxically, you feel like you fit in.
Right.
So Einstein called that an optical delusion of consciousness, David Foster Wallace said the one thing we all have in common is that we all think we're different. Everybody expresses this feeling. But in some people where we can't use that in its constructive way, then it becomes very dysfunctional. And this comes from a poor development of actually the front part of the brain, which is involved in executive function. And poor executive function, I believe, is absolutely everything. It is the baseline of all psychological difficulties. And it is certainly the underlying pathology in addiction. There's no doubt about that. The most important thing is to recognize that executive function is learned. And as doctors, we're very quick to medicate people, right, for symptoms. But if you're not coping, if you don't have healthy relationships, if you can't manage your money, if you're using substances, why would you not feel depressed? Why would you not feel anxious? Why would you not feel like you're not coping? And so the starting point for everything, of course, is not to try and cover these things up with yet another drug, which is what I've been doing my whole life, right? By drinking lashings of scotch. But rather to identify what I can learn and embark on that journey of learning it so that I can grow into the potential me that I could have been, right? Or that I still can be and that I can contribute. There's a much better sense of wholeness than that, than just continually trying to patch things up. So I thought we'd talk about that.
Lovely. Yeah.
All right. So let me just start off by drawing something. If we have a look at, this is the brain, right? This is what a brain looks like. I'm not that, obviously. So we're looking at this is not to scale here, obviously. This is the front of the brain, right? And this is the back of the brain. We're looking side on. We're looking side on from the right side of the brain. And if you have a look at the front of the brain here, there's an area of the brain there called the prefrontal cortex. And this is the part of the brain that is responsible for purposeful thinking. And this is where it's the home of executive function, right? Now, it's very trite to say that this part of the brain does something or that part of the brain does something, and we're always separating the brain into little bits of areas and saying, oh, this does emotion, this does memory, this. And of course, that's just nonsense. I mean, there are different areas of the brain that light up when we put them in an imaging scan to see which parts of the brain are predominantly working. But it's like the body, everything works together, right? The brain has to work as an entire organ to be properly functional. But for what it's worth, so we've got the active, the purposeful thinking part of the brain, and in these deeper areas of the brain here, these are the areas of the brain that are below our levels of awareness. So these are the areas of the brain where emotions arise, where your memories form, where you fall in love, where you find things beautiful, where you get vibes with other people, where you feel an energy, where you're attracted to people or repelled from people, or where you're anxious, or where you're happy, or where you feel relief, or you're excited. You obviously don't decide to do that, right? These are also the areas of the brain where our impulses arise and we act without thinking. So we often talk about that, act without thinking. So clearly that's below our levels of awareness if we've been acting without thinking. Now these parts of the brain, of course, are very intimately connected. And as I say, I mean, all parts of the brain really work together. So there's these pathways where everything is sort of connected together. That's why we refer to networks of the brain, just like we would refer to a network of roads. If I wanted to travel from Johannesburg to Durban, there's not one road, right? There's a network of roads all connected, all joining from one place to another. So we always think that our active awareness part of the brain, thinking part of the brain, is in control of our baser levels. But in fact, what we normally find is exactly the opposite is true. Most of what happens to us during our day, most of our thinking arises here, and our active thinking parts of the brain just confirm for it, right? So we're often acting on this sort of, like we talk about acting on instinct or a knee-jerk reaction, for example. So a lot of the time our day is spent in mind wandering, and that's also here. So mind wandering is important, right? Because if you look at mind wandering and you look at emotions, you don't choose those. And it's so important to recognize that most of the day, you do not choose your thoughts. You do not choose your emotions and the feelings that are associated with those emotions. And when I talk about feelings, you don't experience emotions, right? You experience the feeling associated with that emotion. And a feeling is thoughts and bodily sensations. And for much of us, especially when we have been using substances to chemically alter our emotions so we can cope with what has been a difficult life and a difficult day, we never learn to identify the feelings we're really feeling and the emotions behind them. So we sort of operate on a single level. That's why when we feel anything, whether it's a nice feeling like happiness or relief or excitement or love, or something that doesn't feel so good, like sadness, anger, or resentment, it's uncomfortable for us. It takes us out of this level of non-feeling, right? This level of just trundling along. So that's why a lot of the times we hear people say, it's okay when I'm miserable, but it's when I'm happy that I return to substances.
Yes.
Because I take my eye off. I'm more aware when I'm miserable that I might return to drinking. But when I feel relief, I get immediate case of the fuckets, right? I might as well drink, don't think about it. So when you grow up as a healthy child, this part of the brain here, this prefrontal cortex, this frontal cortex, and the areas associated with that grow up and become healthy. And I just thought it would be really worthwhile having a look at what healthy executive function is, because it gives us an idea as to where we're going to find a life that's worth living, where we don't need to dampen our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts down with some sort of chemical. In other words, I always think this is a really good definition of mental health. Mental health is the ability to face the challenges of every day without falling apart, right? It doesn't mean that every day is going to be easy or that some days I won't have more difficulty than others. What it means is I can draw on my coping skills and my developing wisdom to formulate a path forward, or ask for help. Yeah. So I wrote down before this what some of the characteristics of a healthy executive function are. Executive function is a really good name for what this part of the brain is doing, because if you think about what an executive does in a company, right? The executive is the person who makes the decisions, yeah? So, and they hopefully direct the company in a way where it's going to perform optimally. And this is what executive function's doing. And so it's important to recognize what some of these are. The first one is the sense of self-awareness. Now, there's a number of different things that go along with it. But one of the things is a sense of self-awareness is to recognize what my body's feeling like, and to recognize behind those feelings what emotions might be present. And when I have a sense of self-awareness and I'm able to identify, first of all, that I'm feeling those feelings, and secondly, start to interpret what those feelings may be, I can then ask myself, and much of this may be subconscious, right? But I'm not actually aware that I'm doing this, but I'm continually monitoring how I feel, and ask myself, are these feelings and the emotions that I anticipate to be behind these feelings appropriate for that situation? And what that enables me to do, it enables me to regulate my behavior so that I can respond most appropriately and maturely and with wisdom to what's happening around me. But if I have no idea what my body's feeling, and I feel discomfort whenever I feel differently from just this level of non-feeling, which most of us as addicts exist in, right? When I talk about addicts, I'm talking about people who use drugs and alcohol, right? We habitually use it to chemically maintain that state of non-feeling. So when we're aware of those things, we can regulate our behavior and change our behavior so that the outcomes are what we believe will be optimal under those circumstances. Yeah. Self-awareness is also a sense of how am I behaving? How am I coming across? What do I look like? If you have a look at what all of these things are, we said just now, they're not only functional coping skills, but they are the key elements of how we relate to other people. So if I've got self-awareness, I won't talk over other people. I'll be aware when I'm talking too loudly. I'll be aware when I'm inappropriately commanding the room, and I'm not giving other people a chance to speak and contribute. So self-awareness is an extremely important element. And what it enables me to do, it enables me to develop a healthy self-regulation. Self-regulation means to be able to alter my behavior to achieve a certain outcome. And if I'm wise and I've got good coping skills and I have a good sense of self-awareness and a sense of myself and my place in the world, then what I'm going to do is to, as best I can, regulate my behavior so the outcome is the optimal it can be for me and hopefully also for the people around me. So self-regulation are things like impulse control. I mean, of course, we know for all of us who haven't been able to leave substances alone, to not drink, we clearly don't have any self-regulation. We just act on impulses. When I feel something, when I have a strong emotion, when I don't feel like working, when I just feel uncomfortable, I automatically reach out and have a drink, right, to dampen those feelings down. That's an impulse. I'm not able to delay that gratification. I'm not able to say, hey, I've got some work to do this morning and I'll only start drinking at 2 o'clock. What I think is, okay, well, it's 8:30. One will be okay, yeah? And then, of course, the first thing that alcohol does is it gives you a case of the fuck it's, and, it takes away all future anticipation of future consequences, right? So we don't have any self-regulation. Emotional regulation is the ability to identify and respond to our emotions appropriately. There are no good or bad emotions. You don't choose your emotions. They just arise, right? And some of us are a little bit more emotionally volatile than others. It's what you do with the emotion that makes that emotion helpful or unhelpful. All emotions are functional. Your brain creates emotions to tell you what your body needs. And then you experience that emotion as a feeling, as thoughts, and bodily sensations. And hopefully, if you've got good sense of self-awareness and a good sense of self-regulation, then you can respond to that emotion appropriately, right? So if I'm going into a situation that's new to me, then my brain might create the emotion of anxiety. And I'll feel that as a certain feeling. I'll suddenly think, hey, Dave, you need to be careful. What's going to happen here? What's going on around you? And my heart might beat a bit faster. I might feel a little bit nervous. So that's the feeling behind anxiety. And if I have good sense of self-awareness, I will understand that. I'll be able to say, is that appropriate here? I'm feeling very anxious because I need to speak to people, right? Well, it's understandable, especially if I've got a bit of low self-esteem and low self-confidence, but it's not necessary. And if I've got good sense of self-awareness and self-regulation, I can even say to myself, and why am I going to speak to those people? I'm going to speak to those people because I have a service to offer them, right? They have something I can contribute to those people. So it's worthwhile me going to speak to those people. Now my anxiety turns to excitement and anticipation, right? But if I can't identify what that is, then my thoughts might just run away with me. My bodily sensations get stronger. And if I've got no self-regulation, I'll just have a drink, right? And I won't end up speaking to those people in the end anyway. So there's no good or bad emotions. There's no right or wrong emotions. It's how you respond to them that makes them helpful or unhelpful, helpful or unhelpful. So it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to take a brick out the boot of your car and hit someone else on the head with it. Don't choose to feel angry, but you do, with self-awareness and recognizing that you're feeling angry, have a choice on how you respond to that anger. So we mentioned motivation and perseverance. If you are not encouraged as a young person, or you have consistent disappointments, or you have a family structure where it's volatile and in disarray, and there is no structure, and it's all over the place. So especially, for example, if your parents are addicts, then there's no structure at home and everything is chaotic. You never learn that anything's worth doing. And especially if you grow up in a home where there's a lot of argument, there's a lot of friction, or sometimes abuse, you often learn, in fact, that nothing is fun. There's no enjoyment in anything. Birthdays aren't fun. Christmas aren't fun. Everything. You end up in despair, So you don't learn the sense of motivation. You don't learn that it's worth doing things and that when you start, it's worth persevering. Notice that if you're going to start something and you're going to persevere with it, you need a good sense of self-awareness and you need a good sense of self-regulation, right? Because sometimes you might do something and you become despondent, or you're just disappointed, or it doesn't work out the way you want it to. You need a sense of self-regulation to continue to do that in the face of not wanting to. And much of our life, we're called to do things we don't want to do, right? Or we anticipate we could be doing something else. And we require a strong sense of self-regulation, strong sense of self-awareness to know that that is important to us or to someone else or to other people, and that it's worthwhile us doing that. Working memory is what enables me to remember what I'm doing. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Planning and prioritizing and solving problems, all of these things are important to that. And of course, to do that, I need flexible thinking. Now, if you think about what is flexible thinking is learning from the past and learning from what I know. And so what these things enable me to do, extremely important, is to use what I know, in other words, hindsight, and to use that to predict future consequences. And this is what a lot of people argue, that this is what the function of consciousness is, right? Is that we can predict the future so that we don't have to suffer consequences of unhelpful behavior. I don't need to drive my car off a cliff to know that that's a bad idea. And I don't have to do that before to know that that's a good idea. Of course, if I've been drinking, I probably have done that before, right? But nevertheless, so very, very importantly, working memory and these planning and flexible thinking functions help me to predict the future, and they help me to make decisions based on what I think that the outcome might be. If you think about when we're drinking a lot, we don't have that at all. So you think about this, if we go down this list and we think about what's there when we're drinking, we've got absolutely zero sense of self-awareness, absolutely no self-regulation at all, otherwise we wouldn't keep on drinking. We certainly don't learn from the past. We know what happened in the past, but we tell ourselves that's not going to happen again, right? Yesterday I had a couple of drinks. My family was angry with me. My wife left me. I crashed the car, but I think I'll have another one today. We don't have emotional regulation. We become extremely emotionally volatile, especially when we're inebriated. We're often not motivated to start doing anything or to persevere with things when we do them. We often start a task and we'll just forget about it because we get completely lost in our drinking. And of course, our planning and flexible thinking. It's not that these necessarily disappear per se. It's that very often they weren't there in the first place. And that is one of the reasons why we turn to substances in the first place. Because as I mentioned to you, this is the basis of coping skills. If I don't have a good sense of these and I don't have a good sense of who I am, then life is very difficult. But it's also very important to remember that as soon as we start drinking, as soon as we start using substances, especially on a regular basis, all of these things disappear. And we damage our brain, we damage our learning, right? Now, the underpinning all of these, the most important one of all, and the starting point for all of them is attention. Being able to attend to what I'm feeling, to have a conscious sense of myself and my place in the world, being able to tend to what is happening around me, paying attention to how I perceive other people and how they may be perceiving me. So much of our communication, right, is not what we say. It's what we look like. It's how we behave. And so if I'm paying attention to somebody else, I can pick up those things, what their body language is saying to me. This is all below our levels of awareness, right? We're not even aware we're paying attention to this, but we need to be able to pay attention, to have those connected pathways so that our body can intuit these things, right? And to pay attention, like all the other executive functions, is learn. You learn, pay attention as a small child and growing up into early and later childhood and early adolescence and as a young adult by paying attention, by having to pay attention. And paying attention has three elements to it. The first thing is to attend to something. In other words, to pay attention to it in the first place, to sustain attention on it so that you can attend to it. And very importantly, when your attention is diverted away, to be able to bring your attention back. That's one of the places where working memory fits in, right? Because if your attention is diverted away, you need to be able to remember what you were doing so you can pick up where you left off, right? So attention is very important. Just wanted to show one other area why attention is important. Because if you think about paying attention, right, there's a couple of things that come from it. The first thing is that what I pay attention to influences what my thoughts are, what I think, and that influences, and what I'm paying attention to influences how I feel. In other words, what emotions are stirred up by that. I mean, just think of when you're watching a movie, right? While you're watching a movie and you're paying attention to that movie, you're thinking about the movie, you're thinking about the characters, you're becoming involved in the characters. If you've got healthy executive function and you're an empathetic person, you might even feel what you imagine the characters are feeling in that movie, right? And what comes from both thoughts and feelings or behavior. We'll talk about this a lot because how we behave is how we present ourselves to the world. When I talk about self-awareness and being aware of feelings, it's the point of that, and why it's so important is because it gives you a sense of self-identity. It gives you a sense of how you're placed in the world and among other people. That's not the same, of course, as caring whether other people care about your feelings. People don't care about your feelings, and nor should they. You don't care about other people's feelings. People care about how you behave, because that is how you present yourself to the world, right? And that's how you interact with them. So how you feel is important to you for a sense of self, for a healthy sense of being a human being and being a part of a group. But it's how you behave that is important to other people. Yeah? So this is why paying attention is very important. But it's also important to recognize that if I'm paying attention to something, then I'm not paying attention to something else. And I have a sense of unawareness to other things. Now, if you think about it, what I'm not paying attention to might have influenced my thoughts and emotions and behavior, right? So, what I'm not paying attention to influences my thoughts, my feelings, and my behavior. In other words, it sets me off on a path which is a different path to what I might have been on had I been paying attention to something else. So what I pay attention to is profoundly important because my thoughts, my feelings, and my behavior, of course, they determine my future because they have consequences. And so, yeah, what I pay attention to and what I don't pay attention to, profoundly important, right? Because it determines what happens next. So executive function, that's it's the key to everything, I think. Key thing about executive function is it's learned. It's learned. And so it's the first port of call for healing. For our addictions, our depression, our anxiety. You think about all the characteristics of ADHD, right? I mean, we so glibly and quickly label somebody with, everyone's got ADHD these days, which doesn't mean to say that they might not have But ADHD is a dysfunction of executive function. It's an inability to pay attention. It's especially, actually, to bring your attention back when it's diverted away. That's the key problem in ADHD. But because of that, it affects motivation, it affects perseverance, it affects a sense of self-awareness, it affects the way I relate to other people. And you might display all of those things, and it might manifest as, for example, you have ADHD. But the first port of call, of course, is to recognize that for most people who display this, it's because we've never learned executive function. And it's never too late to start and embark on this journey of learning. And obviously, we need help to do that very often, but not always, because learning something starts with an awareness of what I don't know. If I don't know what I don't know, then there's nothing I can do about it. As soon as I recognize that I know, as soon as I know that I don't know, if I recognize something I don't know, then I can embark on a journey of learning it. Yeah. And ask for help. And ask for help if I need it. Yes.
Well, I think what a lovely topic. You presented that really in such a nice way. Mindfulness. I think in my case, when I learned and truly understood what mindfulness meant, I think I had a preconceived idea, like with a lot of these things that we talk about what it is or what it was, or perhaps just listening to one opinion and then using that as the basis for any form of judgment. But mindfulness essentially is just paying attention on purpose.
Yes, exactly that. And the lovely thing about paying attention on purpose is it starts with the realization that I need to pay attention. And for many of us who haven't learned to pay attention, there are very simple things we can start doing, right? For example, if we want to start developing a sense of self-awareness, sense of self-awareness begins with paying attention to how I feel, right? And so very simply, two simple questions. What am I feeling? But you must answer the question, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What am I feeling? And what am I thinking? To bring my attention to myself. Lots of simple exercises. We can do a whole episode on this. Simple exercises. What am I feeling? Just ask, well, what do my hands feel like? Right up until now, you didn't even know you had hands, right? But now you're acutely conscious of them. What does it feel like to walk? What does it feel like when I eat? What does it feel like to wash my hands under the tap, right? When I'm boiling the kettle, what does the steam look like coming out of the kettle? Very simple exercise. When we think about mindfulness, we think about mindful meditation very often, which is extremely helpful. It's a wonderful skill and thing to develop, but it's not appropriate for everybody, especially early in abstinence, because it can be extremely uncomfortable, especially if you've had a difficult past, right? And turning your attention to your breath, which is what we often do, that can be extremely uncomfortable for people who've had traumatic pasts. So just paying attention to my hands, for example, or what does the big toe on your right foot feel like? Or just softening your gaze and turning your attention to what you can hear around you. These are lovely small exercises to start cultivating the ability to pay attention. I would say there are three things that are the basis for finding a life that's worth living, growing into a life where you cultivate your own sense of self and your place in the world. And they're these, and they're very, very important. The first one is to talk. And to talk about everything. So clearly, if you're going to start with this, it's not specifically what you talk about, because what you talk about needs to encompass everything, right? It's who you talk to. And so we need to cultivate around us a support structure of people who we can engage with mutually, right? We can talk to them and they can talk to us. And also talking to somebody in a meaningful, intimate way also, again, helps to cultivate attention, right? Because I need to pay attention to you, what you're saying, and what you look like so that we can communicate properly. So talking is very important. Walking is essential. Walking is what your body's supposed to do. Walking will teach you again, especially if you pay attention to what it feels like when you're walking and to walk in nature and what it's like around you. Walk in a green space or just walk outside in the sunlight, right? To pay attention to what your body feels like. Walking will teach you what you feel like. It'll bring you back in touch with your body. And the third thing is to write. Writing is completely different to thinking and speaking. When you write, you use different parts of your brain. You use more creative parts of your brain. And if you think about it, when I speak, I lose my train of thought very often, right? Especially in my alcoholic dementia. That's how I get. What was I saying? Walking, talking?
Acting.
When I think, what happens? My mind runs away with me, right? I get into this spiral of thoughts. I'm thinking, and all of a sudden I remember that my wife sent me out to the shops to buy some broccoli and butter. And I bought the broccoli, but I forgot the butter. I'm no good. I can't do anything right. I'm always letting her down. I can't remember anything. I've got alcoholic dementia. And every time she asks me to do something, I get it wrong. I'm such a useless person. I might as well kill myself. I just get into this spiral of downward negative thinking. When I write, I use completely different parts of the brain. And when you write, what you notice is your thoughts flow. And you find that one thought connects to another. And I was remember the poet David White always says, poetry is your mind telling you things that you didn't know you knew. And I think that's so true. That's exactly what writing is. When you start to write, you didn't even know these things were in your head.
And anyone can write.
Anyone can write. It's not for anyone else to read. It's for you. It's for you. And writing is an art. It's an expression of your soul. Every single character that you write. And I'm talking about writing with a pen on paper. It's very expressive. And in itself, it's a lovely, attentive mindfulness exercise. There's one other thing that comes from writing, though. Once it's written, it distances you from your thoughts. And what you're able to do when you read it through again is you can see it more objectively without getting wrapped up in it emotionally. There may be feelings and emotions that arise, of course, but you get a better sense of what it's like. Very good question often when you're trying to work through things, right, is what would I tell a friend? And writing is often applying that concept to yourself.
Yes.
So you get distanced from it. Another thing that's really important to get back in touch with your body is to do other physical activities, especially activities where you need to be in touch with what your body's doing. So sports, for example, especially things like martial arts can be really helpful, especially where you're in contact with other people. So a lot of people nowadays are doing things like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I don't know very much about it, but I mean, it's a wrestling thing. It's not like some of these other sports, but you're very distant from other people. You're in close contact with people, and you need to be aware of what they're doing and what you're doing. And to do team sports where you feel connected with other people, and especially team sports with a coach, right, where there's some sort of mentor who's guiding you. Yeah. So executive function, it's worthwhile taking each one of those one by one and having a look at them, and we can all start to cultivate those. It's the starting point. It's the starting point of finding a meaningful life. And
I think what struck me from what you were saying now was that mindfulness can be applied in so many different contexts and ways. And certainly everybody listening to this podcast has been mindful. They've been mindful today. But you're not aware that you're being mindful. It's going back to your that's trigger. I don't know that I don't know that it. And once I started noticing that I was noticing, it became a lot easier to start cultivating the skill.
Yeah.
And I was spending time with a friend of ours in the weekend. This particular person has been sober for around the 2-year mark now, and they were saying they can only do mindfulness meditation for about 30 seconds now. And this was quite a heavy load for this person to bear. It's been 2 years, I can only do 30 seconds. And firstly, when I was 2 years sober, I couldn't do 10 seconds. I don't mind anything else. But 30 is 30 more than 0, which is what it was 2 years ago. And what a wonderful starting point to realize that not only can I do it, but I can cultivate it. Next month it'll be 31. And so on and so forth, and it will, we've seen this time and time again, it will improve, it will develop, the skills will be enriched within the person, provided they put in some effort.
Well, yes, and it's also be helpful to understand what they mean by mindful meditation, right? Because meditation itself isn't, as I say, not always appropriate for everybody. There are simple, attentive exercises just for a few seconds, don't even require that 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Pay attention to what my hands feel, to pay attention to what I can see in front of me, pay attention to what I can hear. These are the types of activities that we can draw on hundreds of times a day to help center us and to break ruminative thinking and to put a space between us and very strong emotions so that we don't impulsively act out on those emotions, right? Craving is a good example of that, because a lot of the time when I crave, my unawareness, my impulsiveness is to reach out. But if I cultivate this ability to pay attention to those feelings that I've always been sort of aware that I'm feeling, but not aware in a sense where I could choose how to respond to them, then for the first time I have a choice.
I like that. It's like as you said that, the word half awareness, which doesn't exist, came to mind.
Yeah.
I only realized that I was aware when I became aware that I was
I'm
aware.
aware that I'm aware. Well, I'm aware in my unawareness of awareness.
Anyway,
The Dunning-Kruger of awareness.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But what did come up from what you were talking about was ruminative thinking. And one of the words that occurred to me while you were drawing on the list of the page with the attention was obsession.
Mm.
And going down, you called it going down the spiral or the rabbit hole, I can't call. And that is such a destructive force in my life, because I turn a small matter into a ginormous matter by the time I finished obsessing over days, weeks, it used to be months. But with the simple skill of awareness, or just noticing that I'm going down that rabbit hole, and I don't always get it right, I don't think anybody can, but I'm certainly getting it right more frequently because I'm practicing it more frequently. And what that's done is two things. It's saved me a lot of time because I'm not pressed, anxious, unhappy, anhedonic, don't want to get off the couch all the time. And then secondly, as a consequence of that, I have so much more time to dedicate to the things that really matter to me, which in almost all cases is the humans in my life, people, family, friends, groups that I'm associated. I mean, that feels like a gift. But more importantly, it feels like an awake. We were talking about enlightenment.
Mm. Yes. And it's the key to having a healthy interaction with other people. Because let's say, for example, we're talking and you say something that I find upsetting to myself. We hear this all the time, right? Well, I'm offended. No one cares, first of all. It's got nothing to do with anybody else. I have a number of ways I can react with that. One of those ways, and I don't choose this way, but it is that you say something which I interpret to be, let's say, a criticism of myself, which you may or may not have intended to be so. But now my mind starts running away with it. Pierre thinks I'm an idiot. I can't do anything right. I thought he was my friend, but now I get the impression he doesn't really like me or trust me. And now my mind's running away with me. So that's one way I can respond. if I don't have a healthy sense of self-awareness, first of all, I can't stop that. But importantly, I can't readjust my thinking. Say, hang on a minute, that was an initial feeling. I didn't choose that feeling, but I know Pierre, he's my friend. I know he respects me. He might have meant that, but he probably didn't mean that. So the one way I can respond is that first one in unawareness mode, when my mind starts running away with me. And now I have a number of choices. I can either say, well, I don't want to talk to you in it, and I walk away. Or what would be more commonly, especially for me in my olden days, I would attack you back because I perceive you have slighted me. You've said something, say, well, you're just an idiot. You don't know anything. Now that's changed the complete flavor of the conversation, right? We've gone in a completely different direction. But with a healthy sense of self-awareness and a healthy sense of being able to pay attention to those feelings, I can stop them where they are, and I can choose regardless of how I feel. And this is important, right? Because I don't choose how I feel. I can choose how to respond. And I can choose to respond with wisdom and with a sense of what would make a more healthy relationship. And that I could either just ignore it and carry on, or I could stop you there and say, hey, you know, just said something that bothered me a bit. What did you mean by that? Which is a much healthier way to engage in a relationship, right? And so that's what I was saying, with all these executive functions as a whole, they're the key for coping skills, but they are the key for healthy relationships, mature relationships. And remember that both of those things is what makes a life worthwhile and comfortable and seem like it's worth living. If I'm always fighting with people, if I'm always feeling like I'm not in control, that I can't cope, that things are running away with me, then my life is a mess. And why would I not want to drink to dampen that down?
But the wonderful thing, or the lovely outcome from the second part that you were talking about, tell me more.
Yeah.
You know, what's happened is I've got the opportunity to clarify what I've meant. You've got the opportunity to see that you had misconstrued, perhaps. Both of us will be enriched from the conversation rather than offended. And what we've done in a 10, 15, 20-second period is prevent days, weeks, months of resentment, and all because of a misunderstanding. And that's one thing that I've noticed, particularly on social media, is I don't know that people always take a step back and take a look at things from all the contexts. We read it in the way that we read it, and immediately it invokes a response, and there's no thought as to what the real intention of the other person was. I don't actually think people would hate each other if they just took the time to just understand where the other person is coming from. You speak about this frequently. The outcome when we go on this exploratory journey is almost always that both of us have something to contribute to that particular subject. I've got a point of view. Perhaps I was misunderstood, or you were perhaps misunderstood. But through this engagement, mature engagement, we're able to come out at a better place, or at least let me rephrase that and use your terminology, have the best possible outcome under those circumstances at that time.
Right. So let me see if I can see your point. It's a lovely starting point, and it takes me in so many different directions. It's the complete opposite of that when my mind starts spiraling because of something I perceived you said and I attack you back. Because if I attack you back because of what I perceive you said, because it comes from a place of low self-worth, right? Because I don't think that much of myself either. And so I'm very sensitive to what you say to me. Whereas, and if I attack you back, it just reinforces that. Because it reinforces the fact, well, I can't have a meaningful relationship with somebody. I can't have a meaningful conversation with somebody. Even if that's not the way I see it in my prefrontal cortex, that's what's going on in my unawareness, right? Because much of what we perceive goes straight into that. And that's where the reaction comes out of. If you take that different path, what you just mentioned, let me see if I can see their point. Tell me more. Think of the different paths that takes me, right? I might be wrong. And if I've got a healthy sense of self-awareness, self-regulation, an attentiveness, an openness, and flexible thinking, and the ability to problem solve, that's okay. Everybody's wrong from time to time. In fact, most of us are wrong most of the time. Well, a lot of the time anyway, right? The point is, it just doesn't matter. And you can't be right all the time. And being open to the fact that you're wrong is the path forward into enlightenment, right? Into wisdom. Because it enables me to grow and to learn. So it may be that I'm wrong and you're right. It may be that you're wrong and I'm right. Most of the time it's because I haven't been clear and I've misunderstood you, or you haven't been clear and I've misunderstood you. So there's a misunderstanding between us. So we're not connecting. So when I ask you to tell me more, and then I respond to that with, let me see if I can see your point, it opens both of us up for clarity. A lot of the time, though, it's that I'm right and you're right, and that we have different perspectives on things, and that together we can do more than individually on our own. And so what we can conceive and talk about and discuss between us is so much greater than what I can just bring up in my head, you know.
Or accomplished by yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the most important skills that I had to learn in order to achieve this sense of being able to engage with people in a more meaningful way, or to at least get the better outcomes, was this idea of active listening to understand rather than listening to respond. Because for the latter, the moment you've said your first sentence, I've stopped listening because I'm formulating what I want and what I'm going to tell you now. And that's, I wouldn't say it's a lost cause, but it's certainly going to lead me to more of the negative outcomes you described. Whereas when I take the time, listen, sit, until you've finished saying what you're saying, my brain works quickly enough that I can formulate a response when you stop talking. But it's been helpful for me to just hear everything that you've said. And almost always, if not always, it's been exactly what you just said. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't get where you were coming from at that particular point in time. Now I see. And then lastly, one of the things that this type of active engagement with other people has taught me is that sometimes you are going to have an opinion that's not the same as my opinion. And guess what? That's okay. We don't have to agree on the same things. What we fundamentally agree on is that I know what type of person you are. I know that I want to spend time with you. I know that spending time with you develops me. It doesn't matter what you think about, I don't know, politics in Latvia, for example. But you know what I mean. These are meaningless things. The overarching feelings of love and kindness and compassion and sharing and growth. Everything else doesn't really matter. You know, you put that really nice when you said that just now.
What you're talking about is attention, isn't it?
Yeah.
Attention to the other person. And it's a funny thing because it's a bi-directional thing. I've got to pay attention also to myself to pay attention to you. What you were saying there about the differences in opinion, it's the differences in opinion which enable me to develop actually my own opinion. I don't remember, somebody said, if you only know about your side of the argument and you don't know anything about the other side of the argument, you actually don't know anything about your side of the argument. And one of the starting points when you debate is to, when you're taking a particular position on an argument, right, is to actually start by writing out the other position, which gives you a sense of understanding, gives you a sense of empathy. It also enables you to crystallize your own views on your own side of the argument. If you can't appreciate somebody else's perspective, then in fact you have a very narrow and incomplete sense of your own perspective, actually.
Right.
Should we just end off by mentioning a few things that are going to come up? Because in another in another episode, we'll expand further on this executive function and have a look at what the risks and predisposing factors are that drive us into drinking and other addictions, and what comes out, the symptoms, the true symptoms. And know the withdrawal, drink, this kind of thing. That's your physical dependence, right? The real symptoms of addiction, which relate back to all of this, and the way we can come through this. The 7, 8 pillars of wellness, and we'll keep coming back. They're so important at the starting point for these. The first one is healthy nutrition. You can cure severe mental illnesses with nutrition. You can cure diseases, diabetes, for example, with nutrition. And physical activity, mindfulness, cultivating the ability to pay attention, healthy sleep, and very importantly, healthy, functional, meaningful relationships. And then the 3 that I mentioned. So to talk, to walk, and to write, and to spend time in nature also, which is extremely important. And when you walk, you need to walk with a dog, right? With a dog with a tail, right? So that's important too. And with somebody else. And when we talk about all of these things we're talking about, nothing ever needs to be done alone. And that's important, right? If you're going to do physical activity, it's really helpful. In fact, my daughter was telling me yesterday, she does boxing, and she does it with a friend, and she was saying to me, I'm so glad I do it with that friend, because so many mornings they get up at 5 or 4:30 or whatever it is to go. She's like, I don't want to get up. But I know that my friend is waiting for me down on the ground floor when we leave together, and it motivates me to do it. The same with a team sport, right? You're doing something, you don't hold all the responsibility for the outcomes. You share that. So there's a lovely sense of victory when you win. There's a sense of disappointment, but there's no sense of individual responsibility. So that's a lovely thing, and you share the experience with other people. Walking with somebody else is incredibly valuable, because while you walk, you talk. So you're combining these things together. And if you walk and you talk in nature with a dog, right? Then you're combining 4 wonderful activities which help to make every day worth it. And that's what we're doing, right? We are leaving behind a hopeless, barren life of addiction, and we are moving forward into a life that's worth living. That's the point. So many of us get stuck on this recovery mindset, right? I'm an addict in recovery. Well, maybe you are. Maybe you're just a human being who's just not drunk all the time anymore, which means that you face life like any other human being. But what you do have a wonderful opportunity, because of where you've been, and because now of the necessity to turn and face what it means to be a human being, and how you can move forward effectively and positively. You have a wonderful opportunity to learn about yourself and to grow into who you can be. And that's why it's available to everybody, because it is learned. It's never too late to get on that journey of learning to do it. And it is learning to grow into who you can be and into what you have as an individual to offer yourself, to offer the world, and to offer the people around you.
Lovely. What a nice way to close. Thank you. That was great. Thank you very much for joining us. If you'd like any more information, we'll post a few things down in the bio. Feel free to like, and we'll see you for the next episode.
And subscribe.
Thanks, David.